Welcome to In Real Time this Saturday. My name's April Jackson, and I am the owner and instructor at the Jackson Sewing Academy, where we equip our members with the skills that they will need to work in the alterations field, to also to do work for yourself in the alterations field. You may want to acquire these skills not necessarily for professional employment, but you just might want to learn them to work on the side for yourself, to alter your own clothing. I'm excited today. We are going to do another bridal alteration. The dress that we are going to work on was purchased, I'm going to say probably about 8 years ago. I had purchased it online. I believe it was under $200. I did buy it from a site called DH Gate, which is kind of comparable to, it's like an Asian supermarket. So I got it at a really good price. And one of the reasons I like purchasing from there is because if I'm going to be doing any alterations to a dress, if I'm going to be hacking up a dress, I don't want to be spending a lot of money. And I have tried going to the secondhand store and I've purchased many dresses through secondhand, but sometimes I need a particular dress. I wanted a dress that had what do you call beads and sequins and lace. So I was able to find that on this site. When the dress originally came in, it was stunning. I could not believe that I got it for the price that I did. If I had purchased materials alone, it would have been over $200. I was very pleased with the quality of the dress, and it's allowed me to do a number of alterations, and including today's. Let's take a look at what we have so far. This is my beautiful dress. She's so pretty. I'll show you a bit of the dress and what we've done so far. When I originally got this gown, it was a lace up back, but I was fitting it for my daughter, and the lace up in the sizing of the dress was, I think, a size 12, and my daughter was quite a bit smaller. So what I chose to do to adjust that was remove the lace up, and we put a zipper in here. This is an invisible zipper. It only does up on my mannequin to this point, and there is still some beads and lace that has come off that we haven't replaced, because now when I've tried this gown on my daughter, and for us to do for our fitting, we're going to need to take in the side seams a bit more. We need to eliminate a good 1.5 inches on each side, a total of 3 inches around the circumference for this gown to fit my client. And that's what we are going to be walking through those steps today. We're not going to get it all done, but I want to show you some of the insides of the gown, areas for you to look for, just some tips and tricks. This does have some applique on the outside. These little lacy things will come up. The lace with the beading is a separate layer. There's actually another layer of lace, and then there's the underlining, and we also have a satin lining, and we have an interlining, all these to give the gown structure. There are boning in the front and in the back. I believe some of the boning on the side seam might have been removed previously for another thing we were working on, but in the end, we will put that back just to make sure it has the structure. Another change we did to this particular dress, we added a colored lining. My daughter loves pink, so we added a nice light pink lining underneath. And it's hard to see with my lighting set up here, but this does have just a slight pink shimmer to it. If you wanted, or your client wanted something like this, you could always add something a little deeper of a pink. I chose to put my pink layer. We have with the dress the outer piece that has the nice detailing on the bottom, has this beautiful lace on here. This lace already has all kinds of sequins and shimmer on it, and I think it's only one layer. Yeah, that's a single layer. We have this under layer of another tulle that has nice shimmery sequins, and this reflects through the top layer. And we have another layer of tulle, 2 layers of tulle, a third layer of tulle, and then our lining. With that in mind, that gives the pink just a light little shimmer through. And we were and are still adding a few pink reflective beads throughout the bodice. Yes, it's looking very nice, but there's a lot you can do with a gown like this to customize it for your client. We are going to start today by doing what we need to prep this for taking in the side seam. All right, I'm going to show you. If you might notice that all these appliques that come down along the skirt of the dress have been lifted up, and they have also been untacked. When all is said and done, we will retack all these in place. I believe one of the reasons why they're all untacked, I find it a lot easier to work on the bodice of a dress, especially if it has a built-in crinoline and a lot of other layers. If I can separate my whole skirt from my bodice. To some, it may seem a bit extreme, but in the long run, if you're really fighting to get into one little spot and you're moving around a dress with a crinoline, it just might give you that extra edge and peace of mind to separate the two layers. I believe that is what I did. It is what I did because I had to do that to get my pink lining in. So we will determine whether that is something we will do again to a certain extent. I just might do that from here to the front, leave my zipper in, but not sure yet. We'll take it apart and see. Let's undo our zipper and put this on our table and see what we have to work with. That's the thing with bridal. There's a lot to work with. That is why, like I said, sometimes I like the idea of separating my dress because there's just so much going on. I recall working in a bridal shop, and this would be my machine here, and I had no extension to a table. Right beside me was another industrial sewing machine, and in front of me was the thread pit, had an oil bucket with all our threads in it. So it was very inconvenient for us to try and work with dresses of this size. I was always concerned that my dress would be getting caught in my coworker's machine, but that didn't happen. But I do like the idea of having more space when you can, especially if you're working on bridal. All right, let's look inside our dress. White is always a challenge to work with. It's hard for me to get you to see the best view because of the reflective, so I'll do my best. The interior of the bodice has this gorgeous satin lining. And one thing I want to check too, so our lining pulls out away from the layer of our lace. And along our side seam, we do have, this is the side seam along here, we do have appliques on top as well as the separate layer of lining. One of our goals will be when we separate everything to do the actual work and the lace gets lifted up and we can work on it on our own, we will probably do the alteration to any of the solid material first, take it in, and then our lace will get relayed back down, but always cut along the lace edging, never a straight line because that's too obvious, and we can see that. When we relay our lace back down, we are going to want it to blend so that it still looks like one continuous piece of lace like it does now. What's going to happen at some point, I do know, we glued on a lot of these embellishments, so that's not too bad. They're not going to fall off. I may have to take some of them off, pop some of them off, but we do have some hand beaded elements which I will set aside. I will find myself a little container, put them in, so that we can replace those when all is said and done as well. So I think the first thing I'm going to do then is I am going to separate my skirt from the top. That is also going to be for your benefit because it's going to be too challenging for me to try and show you what I want to with everything put together. So I'm going to do that now and it won't take too long. I'm going to undo my zipper from the skirt area just so I can release it and it'll go with my bodice here. So undo our lining first. There and there. Yeah, this, you won't be able to see what I'm doing if I'm going to leave this all attached. So I'll undo that for you. Not a big deal. This is for me, but I think if this was for a client, I'd probably do the same thing. I'm going to fight more trying to work around this than trying to keep everything intact. Now I am releasing the zipper itself from the skirt and the other side. I think I like this idea anyways because I was just thinking now I would prefer a little bit more prominent of a pink, and I think I will do that at some time. With it separated, I'm going to deepen the pink before I put my skirt back on. For anyone who's creative, that's one of those things that sometimes it's just nice to play and create just because we can. There are so many things we have to do because we have to do it. It's nice to just make something for ourselves. I'm releasing my lining, skirt lining first. Now I'm not sure if you're kind of cringing at the fact that I am pulling apart and tearing on a wedding dress. I have worked with many dresses and this is the lining in the satin area. I'm not concerned. I know that it's not going to fall apart on me. The lining is separated and now we just have to do the outer skirt. And I am lucky that All these layers of tulle and sparkles have all been put together in one nice clump. What that means is I don't have to take apart 5 layers of skirt all in one. I am not going to pull this because my bodice outer is lace. So I'm not going to be using the total pull method for that. Just use my razor blade to cut my threads. I am very happy that I'm doing this because it would be too much for my patience to be trying to work with this. The original dress, all these little pieces were glued down, so there's all kinds of yellow glue on the back here. I love working on bridal wear, and not necessarily because it's challenging. I like working on bridal wear just because it's so beautiful. I love seeing the patterns and the materials and the sparkle. Whenever I work with bridal, it just inspires me to want to make something just for fun, to use my creativity. I'm just starting on the other end, going to meet this in the middle, and then we'll have this skirt separated, and we will be able to begin with our alteration. The best part is you will be able to see what I am doing. Yay! All right, I'm going to take my skirt and set that aside so it's out of our way. Let's see how this is all constructed inside. You can see here how we have our zipper, our bodice, lining interior. We have the exterior, our exterior. Let's take a look at what separates. Okay, I want to show you. This is our lining on it inside. There actually is no interfacing. And when we did that, we also boosted up the quality of the dress. With that in mind, this dress, if we wanted to sell this, we would probably want to do something along that line as well. Because all in all, with just this satin bodice, it's kind of a little skimpy if you ask me. I would find if I wanted to get a good price for this, that I would have to do that. But we're not going to worry about that today. Today we are just going to work on the alteration that we originally were talking about doing, and that's just taking in the side seam and how that's going to go with the extra lace. So I am going to make my life just a little easier here. I am taking my zipper apart, and I just did that for myself. You don't have to do that. I knew it would come off because the little pulley pulled off in the first place. All right, let's turn this inside out so you can see what the interior looks like already. These bust cups are really sad. I will take those right out. I do not like those. I just find they're super cheap, and I have better cups whose bust looks like that. Nobody's. So I am taking those out, and we can add a different cup for shaping all in the end, but those are pretty sad. There. If anyone's watching, what's your opinion on these in bridal? I don't even know why they even bother. There are some that are great and they are sewn right to the garment and they give great shaping. I don't even know what this is for. So those are gone. We will add some shaping after. This, we have this beautiful lace here. Our lace is joined to a bit of netting, and that also has some, you'll see all this stitching which joins all our layers together, and that stitching is holding together our boning. Yes, our boning is there too, all under that. And what's nice though is our side seam here. I'm kind of glad there is no boning in there right now, so we can separate the satin, and the side seam you'll see is kind of tacked down due to having a little bit of the beadwork replaced. We are going to lift up some of that and release at our top edge so we can do that alteration. And then we will see how everything's going to lay afterwards. I think I do want to lift up some of these pieces of lace that are on top. That is just one of the challenges you will find when you do bridal alterations. The fact that every dress can be constructed a little differently. Occasionally, you will find a bride who doesn't care if there is going to be a seam through their lace, and that's fine. If you can add other lace and beading on there, but when you have someone who's spending thousands of dollars on a dress, and part of that is the fact that it is constructed in a way that's a little bit more higher grade, you don't want to be having those seams showing. So they're going to understand that it's going to take a little bit more for us to do the alteration to keep the look that they want. First thing I am going to do is I want to release my seam allowance on my side seams. In doing so too, on the inside, I'm going to release it up here, which is going to inadvertently open up where the satin and the lace front is joined. I will keep something handy. I'll be collecting beads. But one thing to keep in mind too is I don't get overly stressed with beads and such falling. I try and keep as much as possible. But I also have some on hand because the last thing I want to do is to be looking for hours for one little bead that fell that cannot be replaced. I make sure I have added extra beads on hand. I've lifted up that stitching and I'm going to continue to release the edge stitching on the satin at this one side seam. I'm also going to have to lift up my boning that is on my satin. This boning has been stitched directly to the satin lining. I do see that there is a bit of a satin on each end to protect from poking through, so I'm going to release my boning. A question I get occasionally is, do I use the same boning? I do not like to use this boning over again. It's not the most extravagant boning, and then with all the wear and tear, it breaks easily, especially if it's been in a dress and then we've removed it. I will keep this for sizing. I will keep these if I can reuse them, but I will be replacing that boning. So now I have it separated at the top. I'll flip it right side out so you can kind of see. There, one side seam has been opened out, the 2 layers. We want to keep our ribbon for hanging. I'm going to do the same to the other side, get it to this point, because then I'm going to start deciding what elements of this lace am I lifting off, what elements am I going to be cutting through, or the outer lace is stitched right to this underlace. Do I want to use my blade to release the stitching? I'm just going to see how easy that is starting at the bottom, and then we can assess whether we're going to release it or whether we're going to cut through the layers. Second side, let's do the same. Let's release the beadwork, holding down my seam, remove my boning. There. Always so satisfying. Release our string, set it aside. There. This is our lining. Lift it up. It is ready for us to do our taking in. We do have our lace here, but we can't just sew through here because then we will be creating a seam. We'll put some pins in here to give you a view what that would look like if we just decided to sew through. On the outer side, if we were just deciding to sew through, we would have a seam right there. And we do not want that. At least our client doesn't want that. But I have an idea how we're going to tackle this then. First thing I want to do on our side seams, I can right along here, I'm going to remove these circular appliques first. Now in doing so, I'm going to try and be careful because it'll release some of my beading that is on top of the circular applique. We're going to release this one. Oh, and any other beads that fall off. There. I'm going to take this one off too because it's just going to be enough in my way. Bring my cup over to collect the rest of these beads. Like I said, I have extra. I always have extra because I know what it's like to try and look for these. Another thing I find, which this is one of the actual beads that's on top, and it's like a little rhinestone in a metal bot, like a metal base. And this particular dress, it's all black now. I don't know if you can see that, but it turns black and tarnished. I don't like that. I figure if you're going to use something like that, use something that's not going to tarnish. We'll deal with that later, whether if someone does decide to take the dress like my daughter, then I will replace those. But yeah, that's very cheap. I'd rather see these glued on ones than that sewn on one that's tarnishing. All right, so I'm going to remove a couple of appliques that are along this seam here. A well-made wedding dress will be fairly symmetrical. So if you have lace on one side, there's a good chance it's going to be replicated on the other side. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to see how challenging it's going to be for me to separate this outer lace from this lower lace. And I'm just going to do that by releasing some of the stitching that's holding it together along my seam that I'm going to be working with. What I need to really check in is, did some of the elements that they had glued on go right through to my lace? It's looking like it is not. It is the beadwork that's kind of fusing the layers together, and that is what I am lifting up right now, is the beadwork, then releasing this outer lace along my seam that I need to work on, enough for me to get up to the top of my edge. If some of your lace looks like it's falling apart, that's what's happening at this point here too. Don't get overly distressed, because what's going to happen is when we lift up this lace, we're going to take in the areas that are just going to be sewn. This other lace is going to kind of be overlapped. Some of it's going to be eliminated. So if there's any areas that are falling apart, we're going to make sure those are parts of the lace that will be hidden and or gotten rid of. Never stress. It's just clothing. And especially when something's like this, it's got a lot of texture, we can hide a lot of things that way. And it's not that we want to, it just helps you to not feel so stressed when you're working with bridal. So I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'm making a pocket in between the interior lace and lifting up this exterior lace here. I might actually do a little from this top edge, just see if I'm meeting the middle. Some areas are down a bit more than others, but that's okay. We're working our way. I've got just another couple of inches till I get from the top to the bottom, because this lace here had a little bit of tacking over here, which was kind of preventing it from moving. I'm going to do a little bead collection here. Having a layer of material here does help to collect some of this. Yeah, those these little rhinestones, they are really darkened too much. If this dress was to ever be used, we would really need to replace those, and that's not a big deal. It's not like there's thousands of them on here. We'll just do one at a time here. We're not going to go to both sides right now. We'll do one. We get through one side seam, we'll have accomplished quite a bit today. Now, if you work with a lot of bridal, getting your project to the point where we are just beginning to do the sewing, that is where it is a great opportunity to have other staff so that they could be doing this prep work for you. Whenever I am doing a gown and I have to shorten, lifting up any type of lace work, I will have someone prep it for me. If I am removing any horsehair braid, I will have someone have it all prepped for me, because I look at it this way. I can always show somebody how to, and where to remove certain pieces, which stitching to lift up, and that cannot be done by almost anybody. But when we get to the steps where we're doing the actual sewing and replacing of boning, the things that require a bit more skill, then that's where I am going to make sure I'm doing that. When we are back to replacing the beadwork, that is another job that I will have someone else do. I've worked in a couple of bridal shops, and that's the exact routine that they use. They maintain their primary talent so that they're not doing mundane things like this. And then they will have other staff. And usually it could be like a design student. It could be someone who wants to get into bridal. They love it because then they have the opportunity to learn. And when somebody is taking part of dress and then putting it back together, that's how they're going to learn some construction, especially construction with ready-made garments. And you may notice that we have like this strip. It almost is like looks like it was probably like a strip of detailing of lace. It's not one giant piece that they overlaid on top. What I'm going to do here is this lace piece here. You can see with my finger underneath here. What's happening is it goes all the way underneath this other lace, and I don't want to undo too much over here. So I'm actually going to trim around the heavier lace detailing. Once I've kind of met right in the middle, I'm not right to the other side yet. There we go. We have lift off. See, now we have separated this outer lace from this bottom half right through to the top. And there is a distinct pattern here. So I am going to trim around this pattern so that this lace area now is going to lift up and allow us to get in to do our work. I'm also noticing that a lot of the thread that they use for some of this beadwork is got black on it. It's not my favorite. Just makes me want to fix some of this. Yeah. Some of these, like I said, they're all black and tarnished. I don't like that. I wouldn't be making this dress for a customer at all unless I was replacing it all. See, what happens is this, and this is kind of fine. Somebody goes online and they buy a dress very inexpensively, like this dress, and that's totally fine. I love this dress. So you buy it and then you find it's $200. It's got great potential, but then it has some of these issues. You have to weigh how much you're going to actually pay somebody to fix the issues for you, whether you can do it yourself. If you pay somebody else to do this fixing, is it going to be worth it in the long run for you? That this dress is going to be perfect for you and you're not investing, thousands of dollars in a dress that you just might not even wear. Does it work out for you in the end? For me, yes, because I just play around with this dress. But I have had some clients who will come to me and they will ask, do you make dresses from scratch? And I usually say no, because most of the people who ask that question aren't looking for a custom dress, they're looking for a cheap dress. And unless they have like a $10,000 budget, they are not looking for what they think they're looking for. So what I would rather do is ask them, what style of dress are you looking for? We can find that online, whether it's a dress like this that maybe is a couple $100 and maybe it needs just a little extra lining, a little extra interfacing. That is something we can always add to and boost up the quality, as long as it's not so extravagant that we're also putting another $10,000 of labor in it. But it's a great jump off point because, like I said, this dress has so many layers that I could not even begin to make something for this price point. But let's see where we're at now. Our outer lace, you can see a little bit, I'm going to flip it like this, has lifted right up and it's like a panel. And it goes right through. I'm going to stick my arm right in here, right through. Yeah, it looks kind of pretty. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go along the design line, never straight, always in like a curve, and lift that area up. So we have scallops. I'm going to start my cut along this scallop here. We may need to adjust that, but right now I'm just going to cut in little areas to release this upper layer. And don't worry if you happen to trim some of the, I think it's like a guipure lace, has like that, looks like a little bit fine embroidery, because in the end, when we take it in, this is going to be tucked in and anything that looks unfinished is going to be hidden. We can always add. I'm going to add a lot more to this anyways. We love sparkle here. Here's where we're at. We have, let me lift this up. There we go. We can see that better. This piece here has been lifted up and flipped over to the side. We have the lace and tulle layer here, and we have our satin layer here. Now we are ready to do the actual alteration that was requested, which is we're taking in the side seams, total of 3 inches, 1.5 inches each side, so 3/4 of an inch on the fold. Turn all our work so it is inside out, and I'm going to sew my seams. Because this is just for us, I'm not necessarily going to mark this, but I may mark this if it was for a client. And I'm going to take a total of 3/4 of an inch on the fold all the way down, making sure our seams are flat. Seam sewn 3/4 of an inch from the original seam. I am going to trim that a little bit because I am going to press it open, but we don't want to have, that's like 1.5 inch seam allowance inside. I don't want to have that much seam allowance. So I did my lining first. Now I'm going to do this lace section, not the outer lace, but sort of the under lace. Same thing, start at the top, and there is no bead work along this part of the gown, this part of the lace. All right, well, that is sewn too now. I'm going to trim it so we have a 1 inch seam allowance like they had. First of all, open out the old seam that they had. So we can press that open. If we were taking in enough that I could just cut all this excess off, but I want to leave a full inch inside. This is the lace and tulle layer. So we've opened up the lace and the tulle. I'm going to do the same with the satin lining. I'm not going to be running to the iron for this because when I press my seams open, I'm going to be putting my boning back down, and that's going to hold my seam open for me. Get my scissors so I can trim that up. Trim the seam allowance down to 1 inch from my new stitching. Make sure we're not cutting anything we're not supposed to be cutting. I'm going to trim my lacy section. It's gone. To see how this is looking. Very nice. So we have our new seam and our new seam here. And one thing I want to take note of now is this lace that we lifted up now, we are going to put back down. So now that I've taken this up, my scallop, how are we going to deal with this scallop here? Because it's kind of like a mid scallop, how it ends. So what I am going to do is I'm going to want to make sure that it just looks like it's intentional. That's what we're going to want to do. You don't want to look like it's got half a scallop here and then not on this side. You want to make it look very intentional. Yes, this is under the arm and that's important, but we still want to make it look intentional. So I'm going to lift up a little bit more of that. Actually, this whole little scallop came off, which is fine, because sometimes when a scallop comes off, like our little medallions, when all is said and done, that this might be a perfect place to put our medallion so that it camouflages an area you don't want to draw attention to. I may do that with this area because I'm not going to get that perfect full scallop, so I can put one of the medallions there at the end. I'm going to push my seam allowance. I'm going to open it out because it's less noticeable. If I push it all to one side, it creates a thicker color. What I'm trying to decide is sewing this back down. I do want to make sure that all the layers get sewn through to the lace again, but not into my lining section. First thing I'm going to do is put my boning back in. I think I have almost more in this dress. There was more lining than there is the rest of the dress. So I'm going to take my lining a little bit more just to kind of compensate for that. That has nothing to do with my client. It's just that I noticed with the construction of the dress that was done. So I'm going to balance that out. This could have happened just if somebody's making a dress and you're cutting your patterns. Because I noticed when the dress was on my mannequin, the lining kept peeking out over the top, and I think that's why it was doing that. I'm going to double check, make sure things are looking good and lining up right. Once again, it's the case that if this is quite an inexpensive dress, this could be the reason, but making these little adjustments, it's not going to cost a lot of money for us to do that. All right, so our lining's at our zipper, and I'm just making sure that my side seams are lined up. So that's better now. I'm going to open out my seam allowance, and I'm going to be replacing my boning. When putting in boning, especially if it's curving to the body, we want this to be curving like this when it's on our client. It's going to be going like this. So the curved side will be facing down on our lining. I always have to check that. Open outer seam allowance. There we go, better. Going to open out our seam allowance. Take our little piece of satin that was covering the edge. Make sure the edge is covered nicely. We're going to lie this on top of our open seam allowance on our satin. We want to make sure that it's going to clear where the satin and the outer lace is joined at the top. We do not want to get this in the way, and we're just going to lay our boning right centered on our seam, but just make sure nothing's getting sewn under here. And we're going to sew right through our satin. If you need to reposition your boning and such at this point, do make sure it's up high enough but not so high it's getting caught into your seam. I always start on one side. You decide which side you want that to be, whether it's your left or right. I'm pressing open my satin with my fingers, lay my boning directly in the center, and I'm going to sew all the way down the side, one side, left or right, whichever you like to use first, and grab another piece of my satin to cover the other end. Because before I get down to my base, I want to make sure I lay my other end to cover. Spin around, 1, 2, 3 stitches. And now I'm going to make sure everything's open out with my hands and sew up the second side of the boning. Just making sure I'm not sewing things I'm not supposed to be sewing. And same thing, spin it around and make like a little box. This is the interior. And we have our boning pushed back in on our satin lining. Very nice. Next, we are going to reclose up the seam at the very top here where this type of lace and the satin is joined. Before we do that, let's make sure our little loopy things get caught in that. That's where they were originally. Sometimes I prefer to have this down here, but these weren't there originally. We're just going to put them where they were in the first place. I just need to release a little bit of this edge stitching so that I can do this seam a little bit better, get a cleaner finish. So now we can go inside, turn the seam inside out. There. When we are sewing these pattern pieces back together, one thing you'll notice is how this particular seam up here doesn't line up now exactly with this one. That's why I'm releasing some more of my edge stitching, because we are going to blend so that it joins in a nice smooth line. It's all a matter of angles, and from us taking in the side seams, the original pattern pieces are not lining up as the originals because they were cut to line up at those points. We need to blend that to make it a new line so that it all blends nicely. So I'm lifting up enough of my edge stitching that I can get that seam blended well. Like I said, you don't want to be too skimpy, and the last thing you want is to have, when the bride has it on, then it goes like this and then like a lot. The whole idea is that it looks like nothing's been done. And most people don't even know how particular garments like this are constructed. So yeah, that's easy enough to do. So I'm going to open out the seam allowance on this lacy section, like I mentioned, because this way when it's opened out, it's not as noticeable. I'm going to pin that open. So I'm going to start up here in the higher part of the bust and blend that so it's a nice smooth line into that stitching there. There we go. And we've already blended. It's hard to see because it's white on white, but we have a nice smooth line just there. Comes down and blends in. Checking on this side, making sure everything's caught. I want to flip it over before I do anything else. Make sure, I want to take out my pen, holding my loop, and let's make sure we like what it looks on this side. This is where you're going to see a nice straight, nice smooth line there. That's what we want. I'm going to go inside and do the edge stitching to the lining. That's going to help hold this loopy thing down. And then we are going to start rebasting down our lace. We are going to hand sew that. It's not one of those jobs that we can do right now with a machine because of all the beadwork on it. But hand sewing, it's not going to be as scary as what it sounds, because of all people, I hate hand sewing, but we are going to be doing it in a way that's going to be effective, but yet it's not going to take a long time. It's not like we have to hand sew everything else down, every little detail right now. It's just getting the main lace down. I'm pushing my seam allowance from the satin towards my satin. I'm going to get this underneath my machine, slide her under. I'm joining up from their original edge stitching. Edge stitching is 1/8 of an inch from the original seam, and it holds our lining down as well as the seam allowance there. Just go slow, making sure my little loop is down. It's a little fussier as we're getting closer to this other edge because our lace isn't all lifted up all the way down through the whole back panel. We are going to blend that as best as we can. And there, beautiful. Now we have that side seam. It's finished off at the top edge. Have our edge stitching and trim up any threads. And now our next step is we are going to lay down this upper lace into place, get it pinned into place, and then just do some hand stitching to hold it into place. I'm going to remove this little guy down here. He's just kind of flailing around. It's another medallion. Put him back in the bucket. What I'm doing to make sure everything is going to lay nice and flat as well, make sure this underlace section, I want it all out so that that seam allowance is pressed out. It is at the very top. So now I'm just going to kind of lie that down to make sure it stays in place. And I like that because when we have that underlace spread open, it is not showing as much, and that's what we want to be kind of more discreet. Don't worry about all these extra strings either because they are from other beadwork. Either trim them off, and if beads come off, we will attach that. But we are going to have to go over and make sure all the beads that are on there are nice and solid on there. As I'm doing this pinning of this sort of the more decorative lace on top of this other lace bodice area, I'm making sure that my lining is not going to be caught. So I want everything aligned nice and flat. And because we have to join our skirt up, we are not going to do any hand basting so that this upper lace gets too close and over top, because we still have to put our skirt back on. So I'm going to make sure that if I do any basting or any sewing, it's going to make sure that I have ample room to sew my skirt back on. I used to always think that bridal was perfect. Everything bridal was perfect. And the more you work with it, you're going to find out that it's not so perfect. The awesomeness about that is it takes a lot of pressure off of you too. I'm going to have to replace my zipper. I see the zipper had been cut at some point too. So we're putting a new zipper in here anyway. So the side from the zipper over to the side seam, I did not lift up a whole lot, just enough to get in. I want to lay this panel, this decorative panel, down over top of my new seam that I just sewed. And let's assess the pattern, what's showing and what we may want to lift up and or flip down. I like this pattern here. It's hard to see, but it has a bit more of a shape and design, and it's got heavier sequins. I think what I'm going to do at the top is I'm going to have that pattern coming over top and dominating, as opposed to having it hidden with this over top. I think it looks a little bit more intentional that way. And down here, I like this. It's like a little heart, this type of shaping in here. So while this is going to go down and this is going to go over top, I want this shaping from this heart shape area here. I want that to be on top on the way, the rest down. So in order to do that, I'm going to trim along. It's like a upside down heart here. Trim along, right along here. And I'm actually going to keep this little area. There's like a little sequined area right there. I'm going to keep that. The reason being, I never like straight lines. A straight line will show much more than the curves in a situation like this. So I'm going to trim my lace and go around this little, like a little seed, or I'm not sure exactly what that is in the design, down over to here and up around this other little area here before I actually cut away anything. Now let's lay that down the way I want. This is going to go over top. And then, and see, I don't mind that this, even though I cut this here, I'm not cutting that away. I just need this to go underneath this section. And so that this section pops out and lays on top. So I'm okay with the fact that it's underneath. I don't need to get rid of it. I'm just laying it on top. And the fact that it's not going to show is what, you know, you can't even tell that's under there. I want to keep that there. Take some of my pins. And my goal now will be, I'm going to pin this into place so it doesn't move on me, down the center, just so it looks pleasing and it looks intentional. My hands up between the lace and the satin. I'm going to put my hand up through here. This is that little heart-shaped area that I want it on top. And then that little leaf, the sequin leaf, that sequin leaf right there just complements the other heavily sequined area here. And now I can put my hand in under the top section here just to make sure everything's in place. Yes, and then that has a nice curved edge here. I'm just checking to make sure I know where it's lifted up along this other edge. Nice. Okay, and I'll put one more pin in there. It's mainly for me to know where that's at. So you can see how it's pretty much blending right in. When all is said and done, no one's even going to know any work was done. Let's get some thread. For this particular job, we are going to use a smaller needle because we want really good control. We are not actually putting any of the beadwork on right now. We are just going to be using a small running stitch that's going to hold all this lace down, making sure that the outer lace, this decorative one, is basted nicely to that pretty underlace layer. So it acts as one. Because right now it is still lifting up, and I'll show you why we need to do that. Personally, I use a single strand because I don't want anything to show, so I double it, but a single strand. Grab my thimble. There she be. Because right now, at the top, I will show you. This is still, you know how this is my outer lace. This is that underlace, and that underlace, and it's come apart. We need to hand sew that together so that it acts as one. To begin that, I do need to make sure that that's all basted across the top because we don't want that flipping down. I have my hand in here. I don't know if you can see, this is the seam we just sewed here. I'm going to take my stitching and I'm going to run my stitching so it's not shown, but where I can join this lace to that area. Hide or knot, just going to hide a knot under somewhere. It's where I love laces. You're not going to notice anything anyways. What I am doing is I'm doing like a little back stitch. It's about 1/8 of an inch long. Then I come up, push it through the layers, come up over here, and it's not going through to my satin. My hand's right there. Just go down and up about every 1/2 inch right now. This is sewing this top lace to that underlace so it acts as one. So take out that pin. Another reason why I'm not a big fan of using more than the one layer. Now, see my hand underneath. This is like the satin and whatnot. I'm just opening that out so I can baste this all along that edge where the satin is joining the lace. I don't know the names of some of these hand sewing stitches. I know somebody had asked me that. I don't know what name it is, and in order for everyone to replicate it, I just know it's like I drop my needle down so it's catching about 1/8 of an inch, go through the layers underneath, come up about 1/2 inch over. Keep doing that so that it's kind of fusing this top decorative lace to the underlace. Keep going. I'll just put my finger. I can still get down inside there, so we're not there yet. I'm not using any free stitching on the machine either because I do have other beads and sequins underneath, and I do not want to risk hitting them and busting a needle and then having a bigger problem with the machine, because then I'd have to do another machine tutorial. It would all be messed up. I've gotten over to my edge. So now that I've got that top edge, the 2 layers, I'm going to do my invisible back stitching, just a couple stitches back to back, just to knot my string, and we're going to end it, and we'll see what this is looking like, and then I'll show you how we're going to go down. So now that outer lace has been basted to the very edge of our top here, and now we are going to sew the rest of this down. One thing you'll notice is it looks like it's kind of lifting up here, so I'm just going to reposition a little bit of this because I want it nice and smooth. I don't want any puckers. Reposition that there and there. Put my hand inside to pin that into place, and then I'm going to go up here. All right, so everything's underneath and smooth. My pin in here. So what I'm going to do next is this panel here, this little section here that I cut out into that nice shape. So it's on top. I'm going to do a running stitch to that little heart shape point that I wanted. That section I want down next. Hide my knot, get my hand inside. Okay, because you may notice like here, it's lifting up a little. I can get my finger in there. I want that right down. I do not want that lifting up so that anyone can see that it was lifted up in any way. It will blend in. So I'm going to get my, hide my knot, come up from underneath, do a couple of back stitches to hold that down. The main thing is I just want to make sure it is blended and holding everything in place. If I have to go over a section a couple times to hold it down with a couple of almost like not an embroidery stitch, but just a couple extra stitches that are holding up a couple of threads that might be flipping up, then I do. This area actually has a sequin that's lifting up and flopping around. I am going to put my string through the sequin because I want it laying nice and flat. This area, it's not so much straight a running stitch. I'm almost doing like a ladder stitch that is holding down some of this lace that's lifting up here. It's still invisible. You can't see it when all is said and done, but it is holding all this lace down for me. I think I remember when I worked at a bridal shop, somebody referring to doing something as a couching stitch. If you are familiar with that and you'd like to share what that is with me, that'd be awesome. I will have to look it up, but that was something that they mentioned that they would use some sort of a couching stitch. The lace that has, it almost looks like a little embroidered thread around it, I am using this little stitch to hold down that little embroidered area. I do not want it lifting up. So I'm going around the area I cut out, but it is just going through to that lacy section that I originally took in. It's not going through to my lining. My lining is still free and moving. I am sewing along that heart-shaped area I said that we trimmed around. And I'm going to come around that little piece of sequins that we have here. I need to make sure it stays nice and flat now, making sure that area is flat. I always just want to make sure it's looking nice and smooth. There's nothing flying up. There's nothing loose that somebody can say, what's happening here? I'm going around that little area. Looks like a little seed or a leaf area on my sequins here. Make sure it's nice and flat. Now, this area at the back was on the outside. Now this is that heart-shaped area, and it's on the outside now. So now I am sewing that along the decorative edge. So it stays flat there. So my pin's lifted up, so I'm going to make sure I put them back down. Once you get small stitch or just a little bit thread left, make sure you don't fight with it. Go get some more. There's more string where that came from. We always can do like a really small running stitch if you want, right near the edge. If the edges are staying, as long as that little embroidery or that little area that looks like a rope is not falling apart, you can do a little bit of a small running stitch to hold that together. I like the couching stitch or the little loop stitch I do. If I just find it kind of helps hold everything in place. And then even with wear, I don't want that lifting up. So if my bride has it on and if it happens to be a loose thread, I don't want that lifting up at any point. So that's where I would probably do that. I'll show you what we have here and coming along nicely. I want you to be able to see how this is looking once we get some of this area down, how it's not lifting up. This is the area I already have down, and you see nothing's lifting up. And then even along here, I'm going to stick my hand in here so you can see a little bit better. It's looking like one piece of lace once again, and that's the look that we want to keep, to maintain. You'll notice this little loop right here. I'll see if I can get that to stick up so you can see. It's one area of this lace that came apart, and when I do go over that, I'm going to make sure I go over that so that lays nice and flat. I could always trim it right off, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just make sure my stitching is going to hold it into place. This is how we maintain that really nice high-end look. We want to make sure that if there was not a seam, that there's not going to be a seam now. Work my way over to this other point that I have here. I'm going to go now to a really small, like a little under and over stitch, just tiny, 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 but just to get to where I need to. I need to make sure this little leaf stays down here. So area that was lifting up. Well, I'm kind of excited at the idea that I'm going to be putting a different color underneath my skirt, because I find that that other pink was okay, but it just wasn't quite pink enough to show underneath the layers. I think I will add a different pink underneath so it's a little bit more prominent, just for fun. Another color that would be beautiful under a dress like this would be like a nice turquoise blue, especially if somebody has like a beach wedding. That would be stunning. I am continuing with this stitching, but I am going to stop right here because I want to make sure that I am not getting too close to the area that will be holding my seam of my skirt. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to do a little running stitch through all my layers to get over to this other side. Make sure everything's flat. My seam allowance is underneath is laying out flat, and any layers are flat. That'll help hold that in place. I am going to start from the top and work my way down, but I do like to make sure that everything's going to stay in place now that I'm down here too. I like going in the same direction from the top down. This way we're not going to get any puckers and anything off kilter. Up here, stick my hand underneath the layers so you can see. And remember, we basted up here. I'm going to see which section is lifting up. Oh, okay. So it's actually already all basted up here because we sewed down here. Now I just need to put down from here down that we lifted up and did some adjusting. So I'm going to start there and get that basted in. Hide my knot. I'm going to do a bit of the running stitch along this other side of that heart-shaped motif. It's like a really, we're talking like an 1/8 of an inch, and then moving it underneath about 1/4 of an inch, and then just enough to make sure everything is lying down. Nice and smooth. Oh, and that pulled out. You can always tell when you're getting near the end of your sewing project because your thread will keep popping out. All right, that's where we insert. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm going to do my little couching or overlap stitch on this edge of this lacing because I want to make sure nothing's going to lift up in the future, especially because I cut the lace right along that edge, making sure that there's not going to be any problems. This section here is lifted up. There is a little bit of a piece here that's just kind of, I am going to trim that off, a couple of raw edges that were just sticking out. I got rid of those because they weren't joined to anything and I wouldn't be able to get them to lay down properly. Move that pin out. Let's get that little area down nice and smooth. I love the really light pink beads that are scattered throughout here. Very nice. This is the area that I just cut now. So I'm making sure that any of the trim, that little ropey looking stuff, making sure that any areas by where I trimmed are nice and smooth. You don't want any raw edges. The customer's just going to think that your work's falling apart, and you don't want to draw your attention to anything or their attention. That's more like it. Still got a little bit here to lifting up, so we're going to sew that down, and this side's almost done. I hope that with a tutorial like this, you're going to see that, yes, this is a bit more work, but it's not that much. Probably without all my yapping and everything, and I probably could get both sides done. But typically both sides would normally, to do the other side without all my chitter chatter, probably another hour or so. So taking in this side seam, we're looking at maybe about 3 hours, even say 4 hours for sure. And it just helps you to know that what you're going to charge for your client. Make sure I don't get too close to my seam allowance. I'm going to, there's a little area here that's just sticking up that I don't like. I might as well get that put down now. It's in that area, but not close to my seam allowance. Even if I didn't put those medallions back on, no one would know that this was even taken in because our outer lace is so nice and perfectly smooth. There is no notice of any seaming on that lace, but we will be putting those medallions back on. What will help this to lay nice and smooth will be the iron in the end. The iron helps to blend in any other lace, but we have a beautiful finish here underneath, not joined to our lining, and just this beautiful finish. I'm actually going to end our lesson here for now. I'm quite pleased with how this turned out, and I hope it helped you to see that it's not much more complicated than other alterations. Yes, it is a little bit more in detail, but that it is very well doable. Once everything is all said and done, once I've decided what type of cups we're going to put in here, I definitely am getting rid of all these other beads that have turned black. I don't like those. The dress is totally, in my opinion, unusable with all these little sequins or those little rhinestones that turned black. I'm never going to be able to sell the dress with that. So I'll remove all those and I'll replace them with something else. And we are going to add some more, just more sparkle more sparkle on here, get the medallions put back on. And when all is said and done, I'm looking forward to when I can showcase this dress. We have been working on it for a while though, but I keep changing my ideas, but we will finish it off at some point or not, who knows. I want to thank everyone for joining me today and anyone who's going to watch in the future. But thank you for joining, and I look forward to next week. Next week, we're tackling a different project. We are going to do, I believe it's a deconstructed sweatshirt. We're going to take a couple of sweatshirts and combine them and show you a couple of interesting techniques you can use for that. So that's going to be exciting. But other than that, have a great week, and we will see you in the Academy. Thank you.